Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Tina Erwin. Tina has a master's degree in business management and has studied metaphysics all her life, gaining insight into the mystical world of magic and spirituality. Her understanding of the unseen world further enhanced by experiences in her 20-year career in the Navy, working for the U.S. Submarine Force and retiring at a commander level. Her entire life, Tina noticed that spirits just seemed to find her as if she had a ghost magnet, and she now considers herself a ghost helper. Tina says that spirits are looking for help, and they tell her their stories and why they haven't crossed over. Tina's mission is to teach the living how to help the deceased by empowering people to assist spirits through the crossing over prayer. Tina is the author of 8 books on metaphysics, and her writing comes from an intense desire to know and understand the science behind the unseen world. Welcome, Tina. I am so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Tanya. I am so thrilled to be here.
So today we're going to talk about teaching the living how to help the deceased, ghost helping versus ghost hunting. And so I talked a little bit on my show that I have worked with death and loss for nearly 20 years and through the realm of organ donation. And so there were many times when I would receive contact or communication from spirit. And so I know that spirits exist. Clearly, you know that they exist. But for those skeptics out there, what is a spirit or what is a ghost? And can we prove that they're real?
Let's go to physics. I love physics.
I love the science. Yes, let's do that.
Well, let's look at something that if you have a physicist in front of you would be irrefutable. And it's the statement that energy is neither created nor destroyed. That's a universal agreement. Even the Navy can't define energy. They just know it is. And the energy that defines a drop of water can metamorphosize into frost and fog and snow and sleet and hail, and it's always water. The energy is. So a human being is an energetic structure with a frame, and the mortal frame can fall away, but the energy that animates the body lives on. It's sort of what Christ talked about when he talked about life everlasting.
Absolutely.
He didn't say we become compost. So when you're looking at what is a ghost, and there's so much cool photography right now. People are actually taking pictures of people leaving their bodies. It started with Carillion photography, which was a Russian guy who developed this, but I've seen this in so many other places. So when someone dies and the vital heat shuts down, you're connected, the soul is connected to the mortal frame by something called a silver cord. Once that cord is cut, and we talk about cutting the cord all the time, then what happens is the soul exits the mortal frame. It's just a temporary structure to enable you to have the experiences of mortal life. Once that takes place, then the soul enters what's called the 4th dimension. It's like a step-up transformer before you go into the heaven world or the 5th dimension. That's just the briefest explanation.
Like the bridge. Yes. And so, Tina, when you talk about how the soul, when you die, the soul leaves, I actually used to physically witness this when I worked in the hospitals. So there were times when I had to be there at the bedside with the patient when we would withdraw life support or extubate the patient. And when they would take their last breath, it was like they had color in their body. But the moment they left, I would see a light or a mist or just sort of a color kind of exit their body, and then their whole body went gray. And I would witness this often because I was there, working in the field of organ donation. I probably was around the dead more than I was around the living,
I get it.
So I was physically witnessing this release of the soul. And I didn't know how to explain it. So I love that you talk about that because I'm sure there's many in the healthcare field that, you know, there was a long time I was ignoring these abilities that I had to see this, and then I suppressed it for a while. Then I just accepted it. And I bet there's a lot of people out there who are doing that. And so, you know, when someone dies, I like how you talked about they move on from the fourth into the fifth. But when we have the ghosts here, the spirits, what realm are they in? How are we witnessing them here in the third dimension? Where are they?
That's a complicated question. When someone dies, we immediately separate in our mind the concept of body and soul. We bury the body, but we feel the soul is around us. And I use the word ghost rather than spirit, because spirit can have a lot of different, can be a black magician, it can be a lower realm intelligence, it can be a ghost, it can be an angel. We have a lot of different things. And when a person is intuitive, and it is an ability, it's not a gift, because you can't give it back. Let me assure you. And I know a lot of people have tried.
You open that gift and you can't close it again.
No. And depending on the level of the ability, there's a greater and greater level of responsibility that goes with it. When a soul leaves the body, there is an essence. And that essence is what we're seeing, sensing, smelling, or hearing, all those different psychic senses. And someone who might not consider themselves psychic can still experience it. And that's because the energy of that soul is lingering. They're in the fourth dimension. And we know that the fourth dimension exists because when people talk about string theory or entanglement theory, again, a physics theory, quantum physics, we're moving past Newtonian physics. What we're seeing is that everything is connected. So when the soul who has been connected to family members realizes that they're out of the body, they travel with the speed of thought. They ricochet between family members because you're not encumbered by a physical body. So someone can smell a perfume or a pipe smoking or feel that presence or that element out of the corner of their eye because that energy is there. And that's what they're feeling. And that's in the fourth dimension. Once they've crossed over into the fifth, that stops. And that fifth is the heaven world. And it doesn't matter who they are, what they've done, how they died. Everyone has the capacity to cross over, but not everyone does. So that's a little bit of an explanation of what is a ghost. They're us, just in a different form.
Absolutely. And so when I used to have to review medical records, some of the smaller hospitals used to set me up in the morgue. And I know that was kind of weird and, you know, creepy for some, but weirdly, when I would be down there, this is back in the day when we had physical paper charts. So I would have all my charts kind of stacked up and I would be working away. And some of these smaller facilities had like maybe 3 to 5 areas for the bodies, you know. And so I'd be working down there and then I'd start to hear them confused, like, where am I? Why am I here? What's going on? Where's my body? I just kept hearing these voices. And at first I didn't know what it was. I didn't realize that I was actually picking up on the ghost and them being, you know, they had passed, but then they were being, you know, kind of ejected out of their physical body. And then they were kind of just hovering there, hanging out in the morgue because they did not know what to do. And oftentimes these were traumas. These were car accidents. These were heart attacks, head injuries, things that happen very abruptly or very quickly for these people. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, Tina, because that's when I really first recognized that they were speaking to me to help assist them in crossing over. So let's talk about that. How does one assist in crossing over these ghosts?
The easiest way to do it is through something called the crossing over prayer. And if you never heard of the crossing over prayer, you can still do it by simply asking that an angel take that soul and cross them over into the heaven world right now. Because in the fourth dimension, there's no time. There's no time, There's no space and no gravity. On Earth, in the third dimension, time and space and gravity enable you to move through your experiences anchored in time and space. In the fourth dimension, those don't exist. So you must say, cross them over right now. And the crossing over prayer was created because just a slight digression. I dropped my iPhone and shattered it. I'm at the iPhone store. I still lived in California. And before I had my appointment, I walked across the mall to a high-end handbag store. And I had just published my first ghost book, and I was talking to the staff about it. And the woman said, "Oh my God, this store is so haunted. You've got to help us." So I remote viewed the store and cleared the ghosts. And I said, "Let me know how it goes." And she said, "Well, they're all gone. The racks don't move, and we don't feel creepy men watching us." I said, "Yeah, because you had some homeless people, and you had 3 women who shopped till they died, and they came back and shopped."
Oh.
So she said, she called me this was the manager. She said, "You have to help us. We still have more. It's like they came back." So I wrote the crossing over prayer so that anyone, anywhere in the world can use it, regardless of your faith, whether you believe in it or not. It's irrelevant. And what this prayer does is it directs help to the soul, and it crosses the soul into the heaven world without prejudice or judgment in any way, shape, or form. No matter how they died, no matter who they were, whether you loved them, hated them, doesn't matter. Murderers, process them all over. And that's how the prayer came to be. And so it's been beta tested all over the world. I have a guy walks through battlegrounds in Belgium and saying it over and over, and he hears these thank yous, thank you, thank you, thank you. Some people don't know they're dead. And that's exactly what you experienced. A lot of people their subconscious is still at the accident site. And when the silver cord is cut, they flatline, then all of a sudden, and they realize they come back to the body and they can't get back in the body. And they don't understand what happened to them. And they're looking for someone to tell them. And the living don't know what to do. And I'm really grateful for shows like yours, because you're giving all of us an opportunity to understand we can help. We don't have to go find a psychic to do it. We can do this ourselves.
Yes, Tina, I love that. And so, that was what would happen to me oftentimes. And so I visited a cemetery called Watkins Glen when I was visiting my family in Western New York. And the moment I walked into that cemetery, I was getting bombarded with ghosts and energies. And I was hearing names, I was hearing stories, and almost to a point, it was overwhelming my nervous system. So it was funny. I kind of found there was a huge Jesus statue, and I just sat under it. It just seemed to be the right place to sit, and I said out loud, "Stop it. All right, who's first? What do we need to do?" And at that moment, I didn't even know about the crossover prayer. But what I did is I called in Archangel Michael, because that's what I felt compelled to do. And in that moment, I just closed my eyes and I called in Michael, and I said, for any ghosts, spirits, whoever is in the cemetery that wants to go to the light, I ask Archangel Michael to assist them to the light. And within that moment, it was like, I personally felt this energy lift off of me, and then it went silent. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that was probably the first time I actually did the crossover without even knowing I had done the crossover. And so where can people find this crossover prayer for those out there who are like me, who are having this contact, from the ghosts that don't know what to do?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you on listening to your higher self and doing something that was so outstanding in that cemetery. I on behalf of the dead, thank you. You did.
I'm sure they thank me.
Oh, they do. You would be surprised the prayers that the dead, those souls in the heaven world send to the living who help them. It's amazing. If someone would like the crossing over prayer, got my nose itches this morning. It's in the crossing over prayer book, which is available on Amazon. On my website, ghosthelpers.com, under books, there's the crossing over prayer book is there, but it's also on the website. You can see it, you can read it. The Crossing Over Prayer book is on Audible as well if you want to play it. And a lot of parents with psychic children could really benefit from this, because if you don't believe your child doesn't know that you can't see it. So if you play this prayer, and I have prayers for suicide, crossing over people who took their own life, who were murdered, for children and babies who don't know what to do when death comes, for alcoholics or drug addicts or people who were murdered, even murderers. There are specific prayers for each of them. But if you don't have all those, the Crossing Over Prayer is there for you. And it's, again, ghosthelpers.com and the Crossing Over Prayer book on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, Tina, this would be so beneficial for those working in the emergency departments, the intensive care units, those working in the field of organ donation like I was. I mean, I remember a time I was in the operating room. We had a young boy. He was probably under the age of 5. And I was standing there at the bedside. We were actually beginning to recover his organs. We had just done a prayer. We do a moment of pause, and we do a prayer. Well, in that moment, one of the nurses kind of freaked out and ran out of the room. And so I followed her out of the room and I said, are you okay? I know, a child is really difficult to recover, organs. And she said, actually, no. She goes, I see his spirit hovering over the body and I don't want anything to do with it. And at this moment, this is when my intuitive gifts, I was beginning to recognize they were getting stronger. So I was able to kind of calm her and let her know that, he's just, at this point, I felt like he was just kind of watching over the body. And many near-death experiencers will talk about this, how they leave and they can watch, they kind of hover over. And so in that moment, I was able to just kind of calm her, and she was able to come back into the room. But like you said, many children, they get confused, because especially with that one, with it being such an abrupt death, and I can't remember specifically what had happened to this little boy, but he had actually attached to a friend of mine. So I want to talk about that as well. Can ghosts, can spirits follow people from place to place, from home to home? I had a friend who worked in a psychiatric ward, and oftentimes he was having all of these paranormal experiences in his home, and he would move and it would follow him and his family. So does that happen? Is that real, that they can come home with people and continue to follow them?
Yes. The manager from this handbag store was married to a physician. He was a resident. And every night when he came home, he'd be angry and irritable. And I said, you know what? I bet you he has souls coming home with him. Say the Crossing Over Prayer right after he walks in the door as an experiment. Because in science, you do experiments. You try it out. I don't expect your listening audience to just believe me. Try it. Experiment with it. Well, sure as a devil, his irritability would vanish and he'd come out and say, wow, I feel better. What did you do? And I actually got to talk to him, and he said, well, all I know is that I felt better every time she did that. Maybe there's something to it. So yes, you're absolutely right. When a soul is, and let's talk organ donation as an example, because someone very close to me received 2 organs. He was a diabetic one day, and he got a pancreas and a kidney, and he was no longer a diabetic. But he had a lot of problems with rejection. And I said, we need to cross the donor over. And together we did that. And he was able in that moment to thank the donor, who didn't know he was going to be a donor. And the donor was not in agreement with the harvesting of his organs. He was very upset about it. So that anger lowers the frequency of the organ, which reduces the ability of the body to accept it, of the mortal body of the new recipient to accept it. Once we crossed him over, a lot of those who receive organs can be on up to 40 different anti-rejection drugs. There's a lot of them. This individual is on 2.
Wow. And that's great for a kidney pancreas recipient.
Yeah, yes. It's been well over 10 years, and all of his labs that come back are consistently perfect. And so one day the doctor was talking about how great his labs are. And he says, well, we crossed the donor over. And the doctor, instead of saying, oh, I don't believe in that, said, if we could do that every time, we would have so much less rejection. And it
Like,
makes
here's
it
my
be,
book.
here's this book that was not, yes, I mean, it's been used all over the world. I mean, in every faith. It's not a faith specific. I want to be really clear about that. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. For the soul that is having the experience, it is not just life, but death changing. Imagine that you don't understand what happened to you, that all of a sudden you're still alive and you're ricocheting between all of the recipients. 52 different body parts can be harvested. 52. So your silver cord is cut, but all of these parts of you are still alive in all of these different people. And that puts you in a position where you keep ricocheting. And it makes a huge difference that you stop ricocheting. So all of those recipients, whether they're corneas or kidneys or liver or spleen or heart or whatever, had fewer drug rejection, organ rejection problems. And over time, following good protocol with, as a recipient, you can keep the organ instead of having to replace the organ every several years.
Yeah.
So does this make sense to you?
Totally. And I'm wondering, because oftentimes I would see a heart recipient later on need a kidney transplant, and you wonder if that energy is moving about through the organs. And I work with emotions in the organs through different, areas. And so there are certain emotions that sit in certain organs. And I would see, gosh, I should have wrote a book about all this stuff. I can't remember all the stories, but I had many recipients who would take on characteristics of their donor well before they even knew a single thing about their donor. I had one older gentleman, he was in his 50s, received a heart transplant, and within days, he was obsessed with the color pink, obsessed with it. And so we started to call him Pinky, because he would come out with us to the high schools and we would talk about, donation. And so he'd wear a pink shirt. Well, he later on met the donor's family and found out she was a 16-year-old girl who her whole room was pink. She loved the color pink. And so you wonder if those characteristics that many recipients talk about, they start liking certain foods or they start liking certain activities, if that is a part of that silver cord still being attached to the organ that recipient has received.
That is all of those stories are very real. For the person that I knew, he was born with brown eyes. And the last time I saw him, his eyes were green. I went, oh my God, your eyes are green. Your eye color? And he said, one day I woke up and my eyes were green. And after the transplant, he could not eat enough Fritos. I mean, he was consuming Fritos. And what happens is the energy of whatever the organ or organs was in the donor doesn't go away because they're put in a different body. And you're right, each organ is responsible for emotions. Kidneys are grief
and fear. Yeah.
And grief and fear. Liver is anger. So if someone got a heart transplant, that may be that the donor was really, really angry that the heart was taken out. And having spent a lot of time talking to donors, I have very specific prayers for organ donors. I have prayers for the recipient, prayers for the donor, and prayers for the donor's family in the Crossing Over Prayer Book. So that each of those groupings needs different spiritual help. And we have the ability now with this book to do that, to help them to see things a little differently.
Absolutely. This is fascinating, because when I worked in this field, I wasn't really privy to energy, frequency, vibration. And now I see it as an entirely new concept that, if they did the crossover prayer in the operating room during recovery prior to the transplant, they would be able to cross over the donor, clear the organs for the recipient, and, pretty much, lower, or if not eliminate, those rejection symptoms that oftentimes
Exactly.
recipients have.
Exactly. And it's such a dynamic concept that if they're already doing a spiritual practice over the body of the donor, just take it one step forward and one step higher and cross him or her over. And what it does, it makes a difference. It also brings peace to the family, because sometimes the donor is angry at their family for doing the donation.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to think that everyone is just, it's peace and happiness and everyone is thrilled that an organ or organs were donated. But sometimes the donor is not happy.
Or vice versa, Tina. I've even seen it where the donor is the donor's a registered donor and the family's angry because we had to follow through with the donation. So it can go both ways.
It can go
those
both
energetic
ways.
cords.
Exactly. All those cords. And maybe if it's okay, I can explain the origination of those cords.
Yes, please.
There's something called Huna, Huna, and Huna are the spiritual practices of the great Hawaiian masters and it was throughout Polynesia, but the original place was Hawaii. And the concepts of Huna are the closest to some of the concepts of Christ and Buddhism. Is a great peacefulness. And in Huna, they talk about Aka, aka cords that emanate right here from your solar plexus, just below your breastbone. And that's a chakra point, and it connects you to every person you've ever met, every place you've ever been, and everything you've ever touched, and every event you've ever seen. And we know this because we talk about apron strings, or I'm so tied to this person. Oh. We know it on a subconscious level. But the Huna tradition talks about this Kino Aka substance, these cords that connect us, and the energetic signatures and experiences that flow along those cords create what are called Akashic records, aka SHIC, Akashic records. And those records are created through the Aka cords, life after life after life.
Wow. I did not realize that. I read the Akashic often, but I did not know the history behind that. That is fascinating.
Understanding Huna, there's only one sin in Huna, and it's hurting one of the three selves: conscious, subconscious, superconscious. And when you can understanding the physics behind it, how are we connected? So quantum physics is discussing string theory, that everything is connected. You can ring a bell in this universe, and 10 universes over here, it can also be ringing.
Yeah, like the butterfly effect.
Yeah, that connection is still there. We're all tied and connected in this massive web. And we know this through nerve endings that are super fine and filament-like. Now, let's say, as an example, someone is getting divorced, but they still feel this energy traveling between the person that they were previously married to. Maybe it's toxic. If you visually imagine yourself cutting the cord to that person, you can stop a lot of that. So you can learn to cut those cords. So maybe that's a helpful thing in understanding it. When you cross a donor over, or any person who's died over, it reduces the grief that the family is feeling, because many times they don't know if they're grieving just their own grief or also the grief of the person who has died, because the dead grieve.
Yes. And so do you feel that when families are holding on so tightly to the loss of that loved one, that it actually continues to anchor their soul here still, and that's what creates these earthbound spirits?
Yes, that is a perfect definition. I crossed over a physician who was my neighbor. He was an orthopedic surgeon, leading orthopedic surgeon in San Diego. I crossed him over, and he appeared in my office one day. I knew he died. I didn't know the circumstances. He was on a motorcycle. He avoided hitting a skunk because it was going to smell bad, and laid the bike down in his body, left the bike, and smashed into these water pipes, and he was it was an instant death. And he described leaving his body. He described hearing his family get the news. And then he described in detail to me the black cords that were wrapping around him to the point that he was suffocating. And he said, if you don't cross me over, they will never release me. Oh. It's not just my family and my children. It's my patients and my business partners and my colleagues. I feel like I will never get to leave if you don't cross me over. I need the help. Wow. And so I was glad to do that. And to understand this a little bit more, there's ghost stories from the ghost point of view. There are 3 volumes or 63 stories in those volumes. And his stories is one of them. It's called The Exit Strategy.
Oh, wow. So, Tina, is there a reason why ghosts communicate with certain people over others? Because I feel as if I can drive in. I live in North Idaho, and oftentimes I'll drive into Spokane, and I am just, my energy is great in Idaho. And then the moment I get into downtown, it's just this heaviness on me. I'm hearing things, I'm sensing things, I'm smelling things. And I know it's earthbound. I know it's activity. It's ghosts, it's earthbound spirits, all this activity. Now that I know I have the crossover prayer, I can do that. But my friend, she can drive in there and have nothing happen to her. So are there certain people who are more open to this, or do the ghosts recognize that we are here to assist them, or we can assist them?
I think everything you've just said is absolutely accurate. There are some locations. I was at a location nearby where I live in Washington State, up by the Canadian border. And I went to another location, and I actually heard them tell me to leave. It's like, we don't want you here. Leave. Yeah. Leave. and I cleared the room. So
yeah. It's like, I've had that happen to me before too.
I just bring somebody in and say, clear this room now. And we're good. Yes, there are those people who it's like, we all love music, right? Mm-hmm. Some of us are real musicians, are amazing. The same thing exists in the psychic world. We have to be psychic. We can't live life. When you drive a car, you have to engage psychic ability. I just know this guy's going to change lanes. I have a feeling about this. This driver is not paying attention. That's using your psychic ability, and men employ it all the time. But there are those among us, like you and I, who stop denying that we have it. We embrace it. We learn about it. We make it practical. We make it realistic. And we learn how to be of spiritual service to the living and the dead, which is the entire point of psychic ability. It's not to flip cards and tell futures. Yeah. It's not. So, yes, when you go into a certain place, in certain areas, you're feeling a frequency. If I walk into a forest, the Japanese call it forest bathing. That frequency with these fabulous fir trees is really, really high. If I walk into other places and the frequency is low because something detrimental happened there, it was a battlefield, or let's say you had Native people and cavalry and they were fighting, and it was really a lot of violence took place there, then what happens is you feel that lower frequency. And there are other beings from other realms, which are not ghosts. They're called lower realm intelligences, and they feed on that energy of that darkness. That may very well be what you're feeling.
Yes, Tina. And that was one of my questions is, so there's a mountain here called Hoodoo Mountain, and it's called Hoodoo for a reason, because there's a lot of very strong paranormal activity there. I have a friend who lives just on the edge of the mountain. She called upon me to come out to her land, feel the energy, assess it. Well, I had actually crossed over several earthbound spirits, and in that moment, she almost appeared to be drunk. Like she just got really out of it, really strange, kind of loopy. So I did a clear out script for her to kind of bring her back into her body. And it was almost like these spirits had kind of ingrained themselves into her energetic system. And when I released them from the land, she didn't even really know what what spirit was hers or another one. And in this moment, her land felt clearer, Her animals were running around happy and joyful. But that night I went home and I, in my dream, in the astral realm, in the fourth dimension, was attacked by something powerful, a very powerful energy. And it was mad that I had crossed over some of these spirits on her property. And I haven't gone back out to that property since. I kind of stepped back because I felt like, first of all, I want to disconnect from that energy. But yet now I think this was a synchronicity for you and I to connect, because I need to get your book and I need to read this crossover. And I do remote viewing like you do too. So I know I don't physically need to be there to cross this over. But what is your suggestions on this? Like you talked about how there's so much violence or curses or whatever happened on this Hoodoo mountain. There's a powerful energy that I booted off her land that's now in the mountain that was not happy with me. So what do you suggest?
That we work together privately.
Yeah. It was intense.
It is, because what's happened is I just cleared up we sold our house in California, and I have a really good relationship with a lot of real estate agents, including the agents that we worked with to sell our home. And they said, we've got this house in Lakeside and something horrible happened in this house. Can you clear it? So same thing, remote viewing can be very helpful. And we had the owner's permission, because you can't just, there's laws that go with remote viewing. So I cleared the house, but the house had been used for satanic worship and rituals. Mm-hmm. So when you have a violent act, or someone is doing really dark things, practicing dark
magic. Yeah.
Yes, dark magic. They open up what's called a portal, a doorway to a dark realm. There is such a thing as evil. And when that happens, you've got all of these, to be blunt, black magicians coming in, and they're feeding off of the dead. And when you remove the dead from their clutches and you cross them over, wink, wink, that's the whole point. You starve the magicians to death and they're angry.
Oh, they were mad.
You have to do more practices for yourself. And there's a lot of tools that can be taught that you can protect yourself. I mean, I'm 5'1". I used to joke when I started learning, I was 6 feet tall. I've been hammered a lot.
And I am about 6 feet tall.
When you understand there is good and evil, and when you're dealing with things, a property that has something terrible take place, there are some very specific tools that you have to use when you're remote viewing, and certain spiritual practices and protections that you need to use. For me, one of the worst places for me is a hospital.
Yeah. I figured I had some good training going on, working in them for 20 years.
Yes, you did. Yes, you certainly did. And it was a training ground. I mean, I was a terrorist expert for the Submarine Force.
Oh, wow.
So I designed equipment that protected submarines from terrorist attack. So I had to learn about a lot of evil and see horrific things that had happened, and just terrible things. Because of that, I learned, yes, there are some very good people, and there's some very, very bad people, and there are bad elements out there. And I had to learn how to build up my protection levels. I mean, I have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
So, to be honest,
I feel like I'm working on that PhD, Tina.
Yeah, I was remote viewing a house. I don't remember where it was. And the black magician that was controlling it was so angry, he started to choke me. It was going to choke
that's
me
what
to
happened
death.
to me. I was choked. That's how I woke up. I was being choked, and my breath was being, literally felt like my light was being siphoned out of me.
Exactly.
That's exactly what happened.
So
and I commanded it in the name of Jesus Christ. That's what I did, because that was the first thing that came to my mind is, I command you off of me in the name of Jesus Christ. And it left me, but it took me an hour to really just feel like, oh my gosh, what just happened? It was very powerful.
You are not alone. You are not alone. It happened to me, and it's like, wait a minute, I remembered who I am. It's like, I'm sorry, you don't get to do this.
Yeah, you're like, you don't have any
And,
power over me.
and I have a spiritual team that, again, connects to the energies of Christ consciousness, which was a very, very correct thing to do, by the way.
That's
Because
just the first thing that came to mind.
yes, but that connection, that's one of the reasons when you embrace the concepts of blessing and prayer to the higher realms, and that's your connection. It's one of your greatest protections. It's huge. So you absolutely certainly did the right thing. There are additional things that you can do. And when you're doing remote viewing, it has its challenging moments. That is for sure.
It does. And you always want to protect yourself before I've been on the show with Jessica Jones, remote viewing investigations, and we remote viewed the Dark Pyramid in Alaska. And my first time I went in to remote view it, they had a block. They were not letting me in. They bounced me right out of there. And so I gave it a day, and I went back in a different direction, into remote viewing, and I was able to get inside. But it's funny because you don't think just because you're not physically there on the land, they can still, it's all energy, and they can still, contact. But now I've been working with my archangels, and I speak light language. I take it to a whole new level now. And so I've been learning to connect with the divine, to connect with source, and they have no power over me in that way. But it was really funny that night that being attacked me. I was drained because I had cleared that land. I had cleared my friend. I had cleared her animals, all that. And I was drained. And I think that's what happened is my frequency was lowered after that.
That's exactly right. I have one of the many books I have out is Karma and Frequency. And it talks about what lowers frequency. It's a different ballgame when you do remote viewing. When you're doing remote viewing and you're clearing darkness and you're processing that much darkness, if you're the real deal, you are exhausted.
You are white.
You are just wiped out. And when my kids were in high school, we had a lot of school shootings, and we were told that our daughter's high school was going to be the third high school. And so, since I'm a parent and a taxpayer, I had permission to go clear it. So I cleared the high school, and I couldn't get up off the floor for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I almost fell down. I mean, I had to lay down, and I couldn't stand up anymore. And I happened to be I just was on the floor. It took me hours to be able to even stand up. And it's like I was newer into the arts. And so I'm a little bit more experienced now.
Yeah. And I think too, like you going through that training ground of working with terrorists in the Navy and me working in, I mean, I was rounding at least 12 different hospitals on any given week, in and out of trauma centers, emergency departments. And at the time, I was suffering with such severe pain in my physical body that doctors couldn't figure it out, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, whatever. Well, I know now, once I learned how to clear my energy, they went away. They were gone, So I was it was like they were attaching. I call it the Swiss cheese aura. My aura was like Swiss cheese. It just had these big holes in it. And these energies, ghosts, spirits, whatever, were like literally burrowing into my Swiss cheese aura. And so every morning I learned before I go into the hospital to read my clear out script, to visualize my auric field just light and powerful and strong. And as I did that, I began to recognize certain people that were more on the negative spectrum would literally in the hallway turn around and walk away from me. It was like my frequency had shifted, and they didn't even want to be in my frequency, where then I had other people who were on the more positive spectrum were actually gravitating towards me. And so I used it, like you talked about with science. We want to experiment. I started to utilize me expanding my light body as an experiment. And not only was I recognizing it in the spiritual realms, but I was also recognizing it in the physical realm.
Well, that is a very astute observation. I will give you and anyone else who's listening a really powerful additional tool. There's not just one. There are many. This happens to be one. And when I first realized how bad hospitals were for me, I was reduced to rubble. They would come at me like this swarm of flies, and I would be just, oh my God, oh my gosh. And I would just be, help me, help me.
And so many people, Tina, don't even recognize they're drained at the end of the day, and they don't recognize that they're picking up on this.
So I happened to be with my brothers. We had gone to Monument Valley, and we came back, and one of my brothers was very sick. So my other brother had to go back to Los Angeles, and I said, I can't deal with a hospital. And he said, you're a really good psychic. Figure it out. Like, oh, I just don't want to do this.
You're like, I just don't want to
figure it out. I don't want to do it. And so I did my own quiet meditation. And what I did was, in metaphysics, one of the most powerful shapes, let me grab one so I can show people, is a tetrahedron. So it has 3 sides and a base. 3 sides and a base. So it has 4 faces. If you visualize that you're inside this powerful crystal tetrahedron, and you visualize it such that you can be inside this one, another variation on theme is using your archangels. You have an archangel that clears the path wherever you're walking, and he's in front of you, and you have an archangel on either shoulder. So you're moving as a triangle through time and space. They clear everyone who comes at you.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
And it works. Oh my God, it works so well. And you can do this if you're in a cemetery, if you're in the morgue.
Yeah.
If you're in a really negative place.
You go to the grocery store.
Well, here's another thing. You talked, and you're one of the few people I've heard refer to this. This is Swiss cheese auric field, which is what you see with people with PTSD, by the way.
Oh,
their auric field is absolutely Swiss cheese. One of the things that causes that is alcohol.
Yes.
Alcohol, tobacco, drugs, reduce your aura to Swiss cheese.
Lowers your frequency.
Lowers your frequency so radically. I can't drink at all.
I can't either.
Okay. God,
nope. And I've talked about this on my show several times. Is they call it spirits for a reason, right? Because you open up portals in your Swiss cheese.
And they walk right in. And Dr. Bruce Goldberg and Dr. Raymond Moody both identified this, and they said you can have up to 60 different souls inhabit a human mortal body. 60. If you walk into a bar and you're drinking, your auric field drops to 0. It's like your force field drops, and these souls walk right in, and they can inhabit and make you feel that you're not yourself, which means you basically are shut down as consciousness. They take over, and that's why violent things happen, and you go, it wasn't me. I don't know. Couldn't have been me.
Yeah. Or I had a blackout and I don't remember.
I don't remember because someone else walked in. It's temporary possession.
And that's why these spirits and ghosts hang out at bars. Like when I lived in Florida, St. Augustine, they would do ghost tours on bar crawls. You would ride in a hearse from bar to bar to bar. And I never drank. I was like, I mean, I'll do this. It's fun. But I never drank. But I noticed the spirits and ghosts would always mess with me. They were pulling on my ponytail or, poking me or communicating with me. And I, at the time, didn't want anything to do with it. But my sister was really into the ghost hunting and the paranormal. But that's why they hang out at bars all the time, because they're easy subjects.
Exactly. And when someone has experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, could be they were raped, could be they were in a war zone, they were in a mass shooting somewhere. PTSD can have, or they were chronically abused in childhood. Their auric field is really low, and it's also something called pyroluria. Have you ever heard of this?
I have.
Gosh, you're the only other person I ever knew.
I was in healthcare, so.
and I had a client I had 2 clients. Both of them had murderous ideation, and their auric fields were 0. They had no auric field. And anything could walk in, and they had a huge problem with the entire adrenal system, the adrenal glands. So if something happened, they would be flooded with adrenaline, and whatever was controlling them, they'd want to kill. By using the supplements of magnesium, manganese, zinc, vitamin C, and a whole bunch of other ones, they were able to repair their entire auric field, and it wasn't Swiss cheese anymore.
Wow.
And I think that that is a really helpful thing for people who may feel that they don't understand what's happening, but sometimes something as simple as really good supplements can make a difference. You can look up pyroluria, pyro meaning the absence of pyroxidine in the body, or vitamin B6.
Absolutely. And Tina, too, Jesus talked about mana, and mana is ormus, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. And basically what those are is all of the main minerals, nutrients, and vitamins. And Jesus said you could live off of this without having to eat food. And so I've been taking ormus for years. And really what you're talking about is that it's bringing those minerals and nutrients back into the body to allow the body. And ormus actually acts as a superconductor for our light body. So when you ingest it, it literally creates an auric field around you. So for those people, so when you're working with clients who have PTSD or suffering with these, are you reading the crossover script for them as well to be able to lift some of those spirits off?
Well, I'm getting them to do it because part of my focus is empowering others. I mean, if I were abducted by aliens tomorrow,
which may not be a bad thing.
I don't know. I get to go home.
Take me to the med bed.
I would want to have left a legacy of service, of spiritually relevant service tools. So that's what the book Soul Evolution's about. I have a book on grieving, a book on karma and frequency. There's another wonderful author called David Hawkins, Power versus Force. Love his stuff. So when you understand that these things can affect you, that the vitamins and the minerals that you take, that your food has to be real food. That's the whole organic movement started with that helps to strengthen the entire physical body and the light body. Exactly. So, I mean, it's just great to have a share of this with a kindred spirit.
Absolutely. And I'm preparing to do a few shows on the benefits of detoxing heavy metals from the body, as well as parasites, because I do feel that they also lower your frequency, and heavy metals block the ability for the minerals and nutrients to actually get into the cells. And so I've been doing this myself, using myself as my own little guinea pig to be able to remove these things. But when you do, I noticed when I started really heavy metal detoxing, my intuitive abilities started to expand and they started to get more powerful. And so I feel like, the foods that we eat, like you said, the organic movement, the water that we ingest, what it has in it, all of these things, the air we breathe have heavy metals, in them. And there are certain metals that are good for us and certain metals that aren't so good for us. So it's really just learning about that. We've got to take care of not just our physical body, but also our etheric body and our emotional body and our mental body and spiritual. There's so many, more of a holistic aspect to it all.
Well, your etheric body is your immune system. That's exactly what that is. I've been using French green clay for years.
Yes, that's it. But bentonite clay, French green clay, zeolite, all of that stuff is so powerful.
And I use it every day. So I'm a big fan of, if you only do a cleanse once or twice a year, it's hard on the body.
Yeah.
And my personal philosophy is do a little bit on a constant basis, which keeps the body in balance. A lot of people are angry at their body or they fight their body. But if you go to a loving place, you keep the light in the body, you keep balance in the body, and you build your light body in a way that makes you attractive to wonderful things. You've changed your magnetic attractions, the higher your frequency is.
Yeah, it's like how moths go to a light. The stronger you enhance your light, the more attractive you are, and and just physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And you will attract, and especially our thoughts, just as much as we detox our bodies, we need to detox our thoughts too, because we're attracting things based off of how we're thinking as well.
So I feel that all of those concepts are just the most basic things. Mm-hmm. It's the simplest things. It's the Occam's razor. The simplest solution is the right one. And if we look at nature, I mean, they discovered French green clay by studying parrots.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they're eating toxic seed every day, but that little bit of bentonite clay washed it and it attached to the toxins and just gently flushed it out of the system, which keeps the colon and the intestines in a state of balance.
Yes. And I have the theory that those who struggle with pica or wanting to eat clay or dirt, really their body is telling them, you have heavy metals or you have toxins you're trying to get rid of. So I'm even convinced that, because I would see that in the hospital. Pregnant women would come in with pica and they would want to eat dirt or clay. And I think it was either they were trying to ground their body or they were trying to cleanse their body of toxins. And the baby was at a different frequency was kind of coming in, and on a more subconscious level, what we would call in the third dimension pica is really, something on a more etheric level saying, I want to heal the immune system.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. It also means that there's one of the chakras that's got to be out of balance.
Totally. Absolutely.
And once those chakras are out of balance, I mean, it's one thing to rebalance them and hopefully nobody just opens somebody's chakras, because you can open up a chakra and end up with some pretty terrible things coming in because the chakra wasn't ready to be opened.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So Tina, this was an amazing conversation. I mean, we went from ghosts to spirits to hauntings to how to heal your body. I mean, I love it. I love every ounce of this show. So tell us one more time, what is the name of your book? How can people find it? And where can people connect with you?
They can connect with me at ghosthelpers.com, contact@ghosthelpers.com if they want to write to me. All the books are on this website, also the Crossing Over Prayer. All my books are available on Amazon. It's called the Crossing Over Prayer Book, 88 Extraordinary Prayers to Help the Living and the Dead.
Well, I know once we sign off here, I am jumping on and I am buying your book. It is going to help me with whatever I have going on, especially with clients. And I love how you said to empower them and to have them speak it, because I always say that our thoughts are electric, our emotions are magnetic, and our words are amplifiers, they're broadcasters. So it's important for us to be able to speak ourselves, speak it out into the world. So Tina, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And thank you for being brave enough to put this information out into the world, because it's not always easy to talk about what is the unseen, right? So thank you so much for all that you are doing to assist those who are crossing over.
Thank you, Tanya, for having me. This has been a blast.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.